okay, we'll do, answers first, right, with the pyramid principle. We know that we want to start broad and then, go more narrowly. Uh, we know that, we want to kind of think about this horizontal consistency and then vertical consistency. So right now, like with that last lab on the OLIS data set, right, that was like horizontal consistency, taking this, these findings and like putting some structure around it. And then the next section will be with vertical consistency, really like crafting a chart that supports the conclusion, and then making sure we have a conclusion that is supported by the evidence below it. So, just with the OLIS data set, right, you can see, what I had you do, obviously there's a reason for this, is to really develop two sections. One is this general overview section, and then the second one is the deep dive section. So why do that? Right, it's because, well, really, like I'd say like in a kind of like consulting, or here's this research I did, here's the findings, you'd probably skip straight to like the case study, right? We don't need to know all the extraneous stuff that you did, but these reports sometimes are used for, say, like a weekly kind of report, or like quarterly, or just in an interview. Really, like, it's more because in an interview sometimes you'll want to just show the work that you've done and not throw out 80% of the work, but kind of quickly hit the high points of it, and you can always go more deeply into that if then they ask about it, right? So so it's just like do this general overview and then focus on the deep dive. And one thing, so we kind of load this data. The first thing was just to go here, file, run, and then run all the cells. One thing to note, right, with the general overview is actually, I was thinking about this when I was reviewing this. If you look at how we broke out the columns, this is almost a structure for your first, or giving you a hint for the slides in the overview. Like almost like one slide per dimension is really what you can start getting to. You're basically just reducing, right? If we're narrowing this down to 2 to 3 slides, right, it kind of makes sense. So in terms of what we ended up doing, you can see, well, first look at the customer columns. We have like the Sao Paulo, right, the different cities, and this is aggregated, right? And then we get to the states. And so you don't need both of these, right? Because it's a lot of the information is captured, right? SP, RJ, RJ, right? So we're just going to choose one of these. So this, the first maybe thing that you'll do is kind of slice the first one of these and say, in terms of where revenue is dominated, it's in the largest cities. And again, we're looking for anything surprising. So it's kind of both looking at, in general, what do we see the trend as being in terms of these cities? And then also, are there things that are surprising that maybe we should dig deeper, right? Why? Because those are generally the things that you can take action on, right? If you're selling the most in the largest cities, well, right, that's because they're the largest cities. Not much you can do about that. But if you're selling the most in, say, like a lower income city, well, that's interesting. You can start, maybe that's a population you can market to. So then this is the next slide, is right, the product columns. Same thing, right? Anything surprising here, or out, which of these is not like the other? And then, what's the general trend? So I just like Googled, what's the Portuguese word? Let's, Google Translate each one of these words. And I guess like for me, it was like the trend was just kind of, these are like non-essential items, kind of fun type of items. I don't know the best phrase for that. I would probably Google around to word it better. But non-essential items, right? Like beauty products. This is holiday gifts. This is like recreational sports and electronics, right? So that kind of, like, I guess I'm always having my eye towards like who's the customer and what that tells you about the customer. And then, right, I thought this was interesting. Like, I think this is worthy of being on this top slide, is just the fact that, hey, look, like 10% of the sales, or 10% of the products account for 60% of the sales. So like you can potentially just prioritize them, And then the opposite of that is, right, 90% of the products only account for 40% of the sales. So a lot of the products, right, if we get to 70% of the products, only account for 12% of the sales. Like, do we need them? Like, maybe. Like, maybe the answer is absolutely. But it's worth thinking about that and exploring that further. And then, this zip codes ended up being the thing that we ended up doing a deep dive on. Why? Because it ended up having the largest imbalance in terms of like our 80-20 principle, right? Remember, the whole purpose of 80-20 is it allows us to focus in on that, 20% that accounts for 80% of the revenue or whatever it is. And here we found that even more dramatically. So this ended up being, so we found that. And then we also found kind of some zip codes that we wouldn't expect to show up there, right? So again, it's very action oriented, right? If we find something unexpected, then chances are we're not taking advantage of it and we can react to it. All right, so basically what I ended up doing, let me maybe pull up the solution. But what I ended up doing was just for each dimension, just choosing something like one slide. Right, and then putting a title around it. Sorry, this is the wrong one. Let's explain. Okay, pyramid. Right, so it's like, okay, here's the top city. Just mention, our large cities account for 21% for a quarter. So it allows us to just focus in top 5 products, and then these are kind of a theme. Maybe someone else who knows more could summarize what this theme is. And then finally, this last thing of, okay, like, notice also that that there's a pretty significant imbalance in terms of products overall and the revenue that is accounted for them. I don't have the requisite library, but that's okay. All right. So then so we basically choose one slide per dimension for the overview, but it's also because we have a digger deeper, like a deep dive type section. And, for me, it ended up being this zip code section to look at. And in terms of just interesting things, and we could start to see it like, a small amount of the zip codes, I think, account for like 15% of the revenue, or like 2% of the zip codes are 15% of the revenue. That's 8 times what you would expect. And then as we dig deeper into the zip code data, so here we start doing it, you start seeing, right, we selected these zip codes, and then you start seeing weird, these zip codes, cities, these top zip codes are cities that you might not expect, or at least I haven't really heard of them before now, right? So, okay, again, you're starting to look for like a theme amongst these zip codes. For me, what that involved was literally, Wikipediaing these different zip codes, these different cities, and seeing, okay, is there anything similar? Like, I think some of them had like these port towns and things like that. That doesn't mean it's the zip code, like we don't know why at this point, but we just know we want to dig deeper into them. So it could be like, hey, that lines up with our customers. It could be maybe the salespeople that just really know what they're doing, or the marketing people, or whoever. It could be that there's more stores there, so of course they're selling more. Like, we don't know at this point. You have to it's just directing our research. But this is really weird, I thought, like fixed telephones. This data is not that old. I think it's like 6-7 years old, right? And this didn't, so it's odd because I just wouldn't expect, unless this means something different, like I wouldn't expect fixed, like I think this is like landlines or something. Like I wouldn't expect that to really show up. Maybe it's in the same category as cell phones, but it's also weird because we didn't see this category placed this high broadly. So like there might be a nice way to take advantage of that. And look, everything else kind of lines up with what we saw for our top level data. But here it seems like in certain zip codes, they're really selling a lot here. So like, what does that mean? Is that some partnership that really went well? Is that, like, I have no idea, but I think it's worth looking at more at, because maybe you can replicate that elsewhere, right? So one theme, I guess, is just that, we're reducing, right? A big part of this is just, okay, we're removing the duplication in terms of the charts. We're adding a top line and then starting to, order this stuff. And then the other thing is, for each one of these charts, we're starting to summarize, essentially, is there a theme? Okay, these are all kind of these non-essential goods. And then, or is there something just out of the ordinary that we don't expect? And the reason for the out of the ordinary part is, right, again, it's what can we take action on, right? That's really a lot. Like, how do we think about our business more clearly, or the data set more clearly? And then what is actionable of it, right? So you could see in my recommendations towards the end, a lot of the things are learn more, right, at this stage, right? So is that, maybe I can just explore the data more with more time. I can explain the data further, right? So even if you run out of time, you can still write down some next steps that you would like to do, right? Do a deeper dive in this fixed telephony, right? See it, is this growing, right? We still don't have any time breakdown of, is this growing year over year? Is this just a spike in one store or one zip code over many, right? And then you can see a lot of the, the top zip codes, where can I dig deeper? Basically marry in, pull in demographic information, because we're finding what unexpected information in zip codes. Let's pull in more data about it. That shouldn't be too hard to do. We could probably get that from a good API. And then notice a lot of this is just qualitative steps, right? The first easiest thing is, who knows the most about this stuff, right? They're on our team. Like, we can hopefully call them. We can go there, see what's going on. Once you start to get a further idea, like maybe they tell you in the interview, okay, we call them, it turns out like they're getting these types of customers. The next thing is, like, what can you do with that? Lots of times there is maybe an experiment to craft with that. What if we just target these customers elsewhere? Will that work? What's the cheapest way to start finding that out, right? So that's why we got into this kind of experimental design. So in terms of next steps, it can be quantitative, and qualitative is oftentimes the easiest and cheapest to do. Just talk to people. And then that's valid to put in conclusions as well. And then finally, after you have a better idea, maybe you're ready to form a hypothesis and then test it, right, with a experiment. Again, also with online stuff, experiments are typically cheap, right? Like if you're considering a new product, right, like you can just buy a few Facebook ads or whatever and see, is there an uptake? Do people click on it? Do they want to do that, right? That's kind of like a lean startup type approach, but people will do that. Okay, so I don't know. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to point out is, right, notice that, like, we only spent so much time exploring the data, and then we moved over towards crafting our presentation. By doing that and kind of coming to what seems like a pretty good focus of the presentation, we then are directing our research further, right? Like, you can start to notice gaps just in our, like, it really starts to hit home. Hey, like, we have no time data. Like, we only have 1 year's worth of data here. I would really love to, and you can start to make the case to your manager as to what's the value of gathering this data. Like, it would be great to have year over year data. I'd love to have it for like this fixed telephony. See, is this something that's going to continue in the future? What about these zip codes? Can we get year over year data for these particular stores that seem to be out of the ordinary and doing strong? Is this an emerging segment, right? And then also just noticing gaps, like in our own things that we could just take care of probably pretty easily, right? Here's what we should be doing. Let's fill in more zip code information that we don't have to ask anyone for. Let's talk. I went ahead and called a few store managers, and here's what they think, right? So by just organizing the presentation early on, doing an initial pass of it, right, you can start to see holes in what those next steps will be. So that I really, I don't know. I recommend doing that early. Questions about this or what you would do? Okay. Um, then what's next? So one thing I wanted to highlight was just, in the next section we talk about this crafting a message. I was reading through it, and it says like here's what to focus on, right? A conclusion or takeaway supported by the evidence, often a comparison or something so surprising, passes the so what test. Really, like these four things apply to the not only an individual slide, but the overall the overall presentation. We're seeing. So for the last one, it might be like we see unexpected revenue, strength of revenue in these specific zip codes. Here's the evidence. Here they are, right? Comparing this, here's the what we would expect based on the demographics versus how they're actually performing. Okay, and the so what is, well, can we replicate this, right? Or does this mean that people are underperforming or overperforming, and can we replicate it, right? All right. So what is next after that is some of you, I think people are at different spots, but right, we can see we're moved through these crafting a message. There's like a good amount of readings on this kind of. I think these are very easy, like bang for your buck type of activities. Like just by going through these, practicing it a little bit, I think you can get the hang of it. And then the next section is Plotly styling. So I'll deploy that. But before I do, the one thing I wanted to kind of talk through a little bit is just the importance of of annotations in your charts, because it seems like something that's so easy to skip over, but again, I think they're just really high value add. And if you look at various charts, you'll see like that these details really make an impact. Are there other ones? Yeah. Okay. So you can see them like kind of in these examples that I give, you can see them throughout, right? So in like a time-based chart, right here, it's showing kind of cause and effect lots of times. So I'm not sure like this is what caused it, but it seems like a significant event, right? The Postal Act signed into law, and then something happened. I know one of the activities asked you to work with like the financial crash data from 2008, and it's like the Fed bailout. So you can show the overall trend in the data, but highlighting specific moments in time, right, with annotations can be really valuable. Either to show an impact or hey, they tried this intervention and that didn't matter. The trend is still going down, right? So these annotations are just valuable for that reason. They're also valuable because they like add context. So right, this is like happiness and money and income of different countries, and it adds context, right? Like, okay, well here, what does really like this amount of money mean? Well, this is the average U.S. consumer, right? It starts to frame it for you, and then even without this, this graph seems, I guess, a little sparse to me, but I don't know, I feel like it communicates a lot of information, both like with the coloring showing things close to the line, and the number of observations here that they have. We start to see outliers that they're highlighting up and down, right? And they're drawing just a simple trend line, right, showing, hey, here's what you expect, here's deviations, but there is a trend, and here's the clustering around it. And then here too, like same type of thing. The whole thing is just annotations, right? Like here's the overall plot, but then here's what we expect. Here's kind of these dramas that are out of the ordinary, showing the rise of prestige. They're showing, connecting these lines, showing these are different seasons of the same series, different seasons of the same series. So just like these little details can really help out if they support the message, right? Like the whole point of these details is for them to support, be a takeaway of the message. I was gonna try to see if there's one more. And then just like they can be simple. Like for instance, here it could be, green and red, right? Just to show like positive and negative and to highlight that. Or here it's projected, right? So they're doing the dotted line. So just like those you'll start to get the hang of it, and we'll actually walk through and have the labs make you draw out these different annotations. But you know, it's like just the things that what you're doing is you're calling attention to specific parts in your graph, and you're adding kind of, here's the overall trend, but here's some context. Here's another one, right? Here's this kind of overall happiness thing. It's really like, this looks like a fancy chart, but one way to think of it is really just a histogram, where like, here's the US average of their happiness of listening on Spotify. Here's the world, so we're just sad, of course. And then here's Brazil is happier. But this could really just be a histogram. But what's nice about it is, one, the colors, right, nicely matched, blue and orange. But then I love these. I think these annotations are great, right? Like they give you an idea of like, what are we talking about when we say like a sadder song versus a happier song, right? So it just really can ground the data, and it's very easy. It's not, we'll show you how to do it. It's not so hard to just put a few annotations to solve a problem of, okay, what do these numbers really mean? All right. I don't know, questions that you had as you went through any of the material or things in general. You could see in the first one that once we get to the charts, that we just try to convince you to never use a pie chart, which is like common. I think this is actually like a consensus among people that do data visualizations. So like every book that you open up will, or not everyone, but a lot of them will open up by saying like, yeah, there's these 5 charts, but don't use this one. And the reason why is because it's very hard to compare these slices, right? You're like measuring the area, like it's asking you to like calculate the area visually, which is not easy to do. It's a lot easier just to draw 2 bars or 6 bars and just see which one's longer, right? It's a lot easier for eye to do than to do this kind of area comparison. All right, so this is a lot easier than something like this. Like, which of these is bigger? It's not super apparent. And then this is going to be your most, like day to day, like this is typically your most possible, like your most used chart. It's just a horizontal bar chart. You can, put a dotted line or color code the bars of interest to make them pop, and then have the labels along the side. And then here again, like I wanted to emphasize this. Notice it just, this is a pretty simple bar chart, but here they're showing you, they're annotating this, right? It's nothing more than that. They're annotating, and again, here they're also annotating a couple, right? So what is this? What is this probably emphasizing? You can see advanced economies, developing economies, the growth force. So you're seeing that it's really spurred by China and India, right? I don't know what the gray, these are other developing economies, but we know these are, right, the largest ones, right? So they're just they're really calling your attention to that. And then among these 4 charts, which one are they calling your attention to? Baby boomers, right? This is about growth in the workforce. Cool. They put this little picture here. They just put that here. By not having that for all 4 of them, right, they're showing you where to view the emphasis. So these annotations are very, like, you get a lot of value for not doing a ton of work, which is always nice. All right. But it takes some thought. What that also means is you do need to think. Like, what is the message you're trying to convey? What is interesting? What do I want my reader to pay attention to? Questions about this? Cool. And then the last thing is, like, who ends up being good at doing visualizations? The people that care about it, right? Like the people that care about, like, obviously you have experience, but you get, like anything else, it's a craft. You get better at it over time, and it matters because it's how people take action. So as long as you just care and think about it, I'm pretty sure you can develop pretty good skills in it. All right, so I will